today I'm just going to preface just to let you all know what we're up to. Today our women's ministry took a trip to see Suffs on Broadway, which is the story of the women suffragists in the early 20th century. It was a musical. It was absolutely amazing. And they are the folks who went to see the musical are now eating dinner upstairs here at the church. And unfortunately for me, a few of those folks were people who were going to join us for the webinar. So we are going to be able to send them this. But I was really excited at how well the idea of women voting fits in with talking to the Presbyterian Office of Public Witness. It just seems like the theme for this evening is going quite well. And there was a lot of overlap with folks who wanted to go to Suffs and also to this. So that's pretty fun. Tonight, I am really excited to have Reverend Christina Cosby joining us. She is the representative for domestic and environmental policy concerns at the Presbyterian Office of Public Witness in Washington, D.C. I've known Christina for several years. She used to be here in New York City, and then I've also worked with her at APSE, which is an organization for Christian educators, church educators. And so I'm thrilled to have Christina here this evening to talk with us a little bit about what it is that the Office of Public Witness does, and to tell us a little bit about some resources that, as we move forward in the world, not knowing what is going to happen in the next few weeks as the election is coming, knowing how our voices can make a difference right here in our own denomination, which is pretty exciting that we have an office like this that is able to do that. So thank you so much, Christina, for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you, Jamie. And it is a joy to be with all of you tonight. Thank you for taking your Sunday evening to learn more about policy concerns and why they matter to the church, and why they matter to people of faith in general, and how does our civic and faith responsibilities coincide with one another. I'm going to share my screen. I always like to start with a moment of pause. I think scripture has a lot to tell us about policy and politics and how Jesus, during his earthly ministry, viewed empire or their not of, and how he invited people into his ministry. So let us hear a word from Mark's Gospel, the first chapter. Passing along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men," or people. And immediately they left their nets and followed Jesus. And going a little farther, Jesus saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boats mending the nets. And immediately Jesus called them, and they left their father Zebedee and the boat, and with the hired servants followed Jesus. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I love this passage as we start to talk about policy and government and the church's role in relating to public policy, because it shows how Jesus viewed ministry and the leadership of his ministry. We see Jesus walking the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he doesn't go to the leaders of his day, religious or political. He calls out to the fishermen, to the regular, ordinary people in his midst, and says, "Come and join me, follow me." And that's really the beginning of Jesus's ministry. And it turns the political structures of Jesus's day upside down to form a new way of being in community with one another. And so this brings us to the idea of social justice and advocacy. Some components and vocabulary to get started. is faith formation. Faith formation, the definition you can see on your screen, is essential to the work of social justice and advocacy because our faith, learning and studying our faith, being in a community that worships, fellowships, and goes out in service together is essential for us to partner with and to learn both about God and God's desires for the communities in which we live and about our neighbors in that community. Similarly, mission is the way of the church to embrace God's activity in the world and to be part of that activity in a visible way, often outside our sanctuaries and buildings. And it is these two, faith formation and mission, combined that leads us to a notion of social justice, of seeing what could be better in our communities. Where are people hurting? And how can we use our gifts, our talents, our resources, our voices to make the world, especially our neighborhoods, a better place? And also advocacy. How do we ensure that all people are able to have their needs heard on issues that are important to them, especially when it relates to protecting them and promoting their rights? I like to see advocacy as a form of storytelling, and many of us are probably familiar with Frederick Buechner's quote on vocation: "Where does our joy or passion meet the world's greatest need?" So in our office, we tend to reframe that. Where do you see God's justice in your community? Where are things made whole in your community? Where is life abundant? And where do you seek that abundance, God's justice in and for your community? Where are there places of hurt, moments of pain? And so I invite you to think about these questions here tonight, and also as you go forward from this space into your week, because I think that we each have a story. We have a story of where we have seen and felt and experienced God's justice, and we have a story of where that absence of God's justice and love has taken place in our lives, in a neighbor's lives, or in another way that we have experienced it. And that's really what should ground our advocacy. Just a little background of the structure of the Presbyterian Church and how our office fits into it before we get more deeper into the work of our office is historically the Presbyterian Church has been made of the Office of the General Assembly and the Presbyterian Mission Agency, which recently, just this month, have merged. So we're really excited about that new way of being the church together. How does our ecclesial and worshiping structures align more closely with our mission, and where will this new structure take us? But historically, part of the Presbyterian Mission Agency has been the Matthew 25 movement, which continues to remain in this unified agency. And that really focuses on three major areas: dismantling systemic racism, eradicating poverty, and building congregational vitality. And it has three intersectional priorities: climate change, militarism, and heteropatriarchy. Originally, I personally really wondered about these intersectional priorities. And what does it mean to be an intersectional priority? Does that diminish their value or does it enhance it? I've come to recognize that I love the word intersection because racism and climate change are proportionately impact each other. Similarly with poverty and militarism, or climate change or heteropatriarchy and congregational vitality. All of these are intersecting, interlocking ways of that we see in our communities that either offer life and new birth or take that away in forms oppression and ways that people become marginalized. And so we really need to work on these 6 categories in conjunction with one another. The Pews USA has 2 advocacy offices. We have the Office of Public Witness located here in Washington, D.C., and we have the ministry at the United Nations located just down the street from Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church at the UN headquarters in New York City. The Presbyterian Office of Public Witness has 4 staff people. We have our director, Reverend Jimmy Hawkins, who actually is the director of both offices here in DC and in New York. He sends his greetings. Today, he's actually away on family vacation, visiting his daughter, who is studying abroad in Costa Rica. So he wishes he could be here with all of us tonight, but sends his greetings and is happy to further have conversations with you individually or collectively. We have Catherine Gordon, who does international issues and our foreign policy in Washington, D.C. Myself, that focuses on domestic and environmental policy concerns. And Ivy Lopedito, who some of you may know. She was a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary and was one of the interns at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church in her time there. And now works with our office in Washington, D.C. So who are we at the Office of Public Witness, and what do we do? The Office of Public Witness is the public policy ministry and advocacy office of the Presbyterian Church USA. What we do is we are essentially a liaison between the church and the federal government, and work to advocate for policy concerns, especially as they impact human needs, both domestically and abroad. And all that we advocate for comes directly as a directive from the General Assembly. So this past summer, the General Assembly met. They pass overtures that then becomes church policy and gives us permission and voice and a commitment as a church to then advocate for that policy in DC and in New York at the United Nations. Some may ask, why do we use the word advocacy, and how does it relate to the word lobbyist, as is more familiar in a lot of these circles. And what makes us different as a faith community is everything we do is in partnership with local communities. So when we advocate for housing needs, for example, we're in direct conversations with our churches and partners in local communities that implement programs for unhoused persons in that community. And so since we have this direct relationship, this interconnecting web between partners, local communities, people directly impacted by the policies we are advocating for or against, we use the word advocacy, making sure that people's voices are heard at the table when decisions about their lives are being made. Lobbyists, on the other hand, have a different tax status and advocate often, not always, but often for concerns that benefit their organization as a whole versus which might also benefit the communities in which they serve, but it's more a for-profit circle of relationships. So our task is to advocate, to help the church advocate, to educate, as I mentioned earlier, the faith formation, Christian education and advocacy go hand in hand, and to build relationships with elected officials on behalf of the church. Everything we do is in relationship, whether it's working with partners or elected officials. So some of our domestic policy key areas currently, all of our areas, as I mentioned, are taken from General Assembly policy, and they have to match the energy of Congress and the federal administration. So currently the Biden administration. So what is the Biden administration working on that we can help move forward or to offer a word of caution? What is Congress and our legislators working on that we can help advocate for, or provide a word of caution as the faith community. And right now, those key priority areas are addressing systemic racism and racial equity within the United States, restoring voting rights, voter education, and common sense government reform, supporting compassionate and comprehensive immigration reform, promoting decisive and effective climate and environmental justice solutions, and often humanizing those issues, advocating for common sense gun violence legislation, working toward alleviating hunger within the United States, and ensuring all have access to affordable health care and promoting affordable housing. These are where we see energy in Congress, where there's legislation that has already been proposed, where the church has clear, strict policy on the church's stance that equips us as Office of Public Witness staff to advocate for them here in Washington, D.C., and to help the church advocate for them. Part of advocacy involves linking local congregations, local people, to their congressional leaders, to their individual policymakers. Whenever we have a meeting with Congress, we always bring a constituent of that policymaker along with us. So we're always happy to connect you in that way, if that would be of interest. Similarly, we have global international priorities, and they are closely aligned to our domestic ones, such as addressing economic justice, promoting human rights and conflict resolution, supporting refugees and root causes of migration, diplomatic solutions to conflict that try to eliminate or alleviate the impacts of war, international climate change, Cameroon, South Sudan, the Congo, Cuba, Israel, Palestine, Syria would all be, Ukraine would all be big priorities for our office. And like I said, my colleague Catherine Gordon covers our international topics. So if you have in-depth concerns or questions, we can get those questions answered by her soon. Everything we do is not only done with our Presbyterian partners on the ground and congregations, it's also done within the Washington Interfaith staff community. This is a group of 70 organizations that come together to promote human needs and human rights, both domestically and globally within the United States and DC. And so we have partners in this community that are Muslim and Jewish, Unitarian, Methodist, the Lutherans, the list could go on, and the Sikh community is very active, the Hindu community is very active, and I'm probably missing a few, but 70 faith-based organizations that have a presence in DC come together, and we do that through working groups. We have a working group, for instance, on domestic human needs that focuses on taxes and labor and housing and hunger within the United States. We also have working groups on the environment and ecology, a working group on Cuba and Haiti, LGBTQIA issues. So we do all of our work through this collective coalition in DC. And we do have some smaller coalitions that we are part of, such as Churches for Middle East Peace, the Coalition on Human Needs, which is a secular organization that many faith-based partners are active in, that come together to address specific issue areas as a faith-based group in DC. We do congressional visits together. We visit the White House administration together. We submit amicus briefs to the Supreme Court together, just to show that the issues before us don't only matter to us as Presbyterians, but matter to people of faith and have a moral undertone to them, regardless of the issue. So how do we do advocacy in DC, and how can you do advocacy in your local context? We have a resource that I'll put in the chat, and I've sent Jamie all the links for them ahead of this presentation, called Holy Discontentment. And this is really a step-by-step guide. It's available for free in the PCUSA bookstore online as a free download. And it's really a step-by-step guide on how to do federal policy advocacy. How do you set up a meeting with your elected leader? How do you plan an agenda for that meeting? Who talks? What do you share? What do you do before the meeting? What do you do after the meeting, such as phone calls, letters, emails? But for me, the biggest thing is, and I think the biggest thing we have to offer as people of faith, is the stories from your local community. Policymakers and those who write legislation know the facts and the figures, but it is really stories that change minds and hearts and address systemic change in a way that numbers and figures add value to, but can't do it in the same way. And as people of faith, we know how to have those conversations. We do it every week in worship and in our adult educations and webinars such as this one. And we also do it in our daily lives by just getting to know people, by building relationships and rapport, and sharing our story, sharing what we see firsthand and how that impacts those most vulnerable among us. So this is a great resource. We are in the process of updating it. It's not out of date, but we want to add the similarities and parallels and make it more clear that it's not only a resource for federal advocacy, but it could be used on the state and local level as well. It can be in the way that it is. It just doesn't say that. So hopefully within the next year, we'll have an updated version that we can distribute to folks. Some other ways that we do advocacy is we help host webinars. We host webinars in specifically for our office, open to all Presbyterians and friends of the denomination. Usually those are focused on a specific policy concern, such as gun violence or housing, healthcare, or food nutrition. We have a podcast. The Presbyterian Church has a podcast called A Matter of Faith. It is a great resource. They have a new episode each week, and it addresses policy, advocacy concerns, and just concerns at large that matter to the church. And they have fabulous guest speakers, many names that you would probably recognize. We do virtual and in-person advocacy 101 workshops. We do congressional meetings for PCUSA constituents. And the beautiful thing, one of the things that has come out of COVID is now congressional staff and policymakers do host Zoom meetings as well. And so it used to be that you really had to come to DC to do in-person advocacy or wait till your congressional staff were home on recess and you could set up a meeting in your home state. But now Zoom and Teams are readily available, and they're happy to meet in that way equally as in person. We do action alerts. You can sign up for our email list on our website, which I will also put, give you the link to shortly. And we do letter writing and call-in days. One thing about letter writing, sometimes people, one question I often get is letter writing a thing of the past? Do people still write policymakers, or is it mostly done through emails, texts, phone calls? This past April, we did an Earth Day event at the Capitol. It was the first event of the WIS community inside the Capitol since COVID. And after that event, we had Senator Van Hollen sponsored the event. We wrote him and his staff a letter and included a picture of the event. And the response they gave us really pulled at my heart. They said most of the time we host these events, we have conversations with constituents or those advocating for certain topics, and then we never hear from them again. So yes, write handwritten letters, give them a call. They want to hear from you. And emails and texts are great too. It is convenient and a great way to convey information quickly. But if it is a simple thank you or an appreciation of what they're doing, or you have more time to get them that information, I highly recommend handwritten letters. They go a long way.
Hi, friends.
Oops. Not,
Hi, friends.
Hi, friends. Welcome to
Sorry.
Prepare.
This season in particular, we have a Prepare for the Polls campaign. This is a social media campaign of the Presbyterian Church USA that was designed and implemented primarily by our summer fellows. And what they have done is created since August a video series. One video is released each week on our Instagram, our TikTok, and Facebook that takes a General Assembly policy concern of the PCUSA and relates it to concerns we might see on the ballot. The PCUSA is a 501c3 and is a nonpartisan organization, but we want voters to know that the issues that matter to you and your community, the issues and concerns you see each day matter, and the church has a stance on them too, and to take that issue and remember it as you go to the poll, and remember that our faith calls us into these acts of civic responsibility, and I like to say civic discipleship. The National Council of Churches also has a great resource out right now on what is civic discipleship, and how does our faith invite us to participate at the polls. I think this fits perfectly in the realm of advocacy, because if advocacy is all about taking issues and making sure that the people who are impacted the most, their voices heard when decisions about their lives are being made, the number one way to do that, to share our voice, to share the voice of our community, is by casting a ballot. So I'll let you hear from a couple of our fellows.
Prepare for the Polls, a video series where we will cover important information regarding voting. This series will provide details on how to ensure your voice is heard in this election and remind you of the positions held by the Presbyterian Church USA concerning policies that we can expect on the ballot this November. Participating in the election process is an action of civic discipleship where our faith lends to inspiring hope in our nation, and it is essential that we, as people of faith, participate in the happenings. Remember, the U.S. 2024 general election will be held on Tuesday, November 5th, with early and absentee voting opportunities available. Look forward to more videos with additional information on voter registration, voter ID, how to locate your polling place, and more.
And similarly, some of the videos take a specific policy of the General Assembly and share about that policy. So we'll hear from Timothy on environmental justice.
Hello friends, welcome back to Prepare for the Polls. Today I'm going to be sharing a snapshot of the Presbyterian policy on the environment for you to consider when you vote. As Christians, we are called to follow our Lord by standing with those called the least of these by society and advocating for the poor and oppressed in present and future generations, who are often the victims of environmental injustice and are the least able to mitigate the effects of climate change that will disproportionately fall upon them. As citizens of the United States, which has produced more greenhouse gases historically than any other country, and which is currently responsible for more than 1/8 of the world's annual emissions, we implore our nation to accept its moral responsibility to address climate change. Presbyterians affirm the human right to clean air and water and support policies and regulations that rigorously reduce air pollution and improve water quality. We affirm the economic principle of sufficiency as a guiding factor in our economic decisions, as opposed to excess, which currently guides the U.S. economy. We believe that people are more important than profits, and that God has provided abundance in creation. Thank you.
And lastly, we'll hear from Arya, who has a reminder about how to check your voting registration status, and find your polling place.
Back to prepare for the polls, where today we're going to be talking about how to vote. The first step in preparing to vote is making sure that you're registered. Though it may seem like a hurdle, registering to vote is a fairly simple process that verifies that you're eligible and makes sure that you're on the books at your proper polling location so that you're all set for Election Day. Though some states may offer same-day registration, many states will require that you register several weeks ahead of the election, so it's important to know when the registration deadline in your state is. Fortunately, there are several websites that you can use to check the deadline in your state, register to vote, or check your registration status to see if you're already set. Visit vote.org to see what the registration deadline is in your state, and while you're there, you can check your registration status or go ahead and register to vote so that you're all ready for November 5th.
And like I said, there are many more videos on almost every topic the General Assembly has covered, and how that matters to our faith, and how it matters to the ballot this year. And so you can find those on social media. If you're looking for a place on Election Day to pause and remember that in everything, regardless of hope for outcomes or not, that we belong to God, and to find a place that's led by Christ's example, that in times of disagreement and tension, change and transition, we can come together as a community of faith. The PCUSA is hosting a prayer service on election night from 6 p.m. to 6:30, with the recording to be posted immediately after. And so this is just a time to come together to pray for peace, hope, and unity in the United States amidst this election. And many of our leaders will be participating. We'll have our stated clerk, the Reverend Jihan Yu, present. We'll have both co-moderators of the General Assembly. We'll have Jimmy Hawkins and myself, along with some young adults reading scripture. We'll also have a Spanish speaker offering a prayer, just to host a time of peace, unity, and inclusion for all looking for that on Election Day. And as I mentioned, we are a 501c3, so it will not be related to people or parties, but simply a time of prayer as a denomination and friends on election night. The Office of Public Witness also hosts several events. We have Ecumenical Advocacy Days, which was held this May. The next one will be in May 2025. There is rumors that they might take a short hiatus, so stay tuned, and that's why the dates are not on your screen for next year yet. But this is really just an annual gathering of Christians and advocates and activists who come to DC to worship, to fellowship, to participate in workshops and keynotes, and then it always concludes on Monday with a lobby day around a specific issue. So just an event to keep in mind if you're looking for ways to get connected. I'll give a brief overview of the Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations. As I mentioned, we have staff that work there, and I am based in DC. So more specific questions, we'll have to get to them. But just so you have a flavor of the Presbyterian presence at the United Nations. We have Sue Ream, who's in the on the left side of the screen in your blue dress. She is the coordinator of that ministry at the United Nations. There's always a young adult volunteer present in that office, along with seminarians and fellows. And they recently hired a new staff person, an associate, Claire Balson. So we're excited to have her on board as well. Similar to the office in DC, the Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations is responsible, in short, for taking General Assembly policy and advocating for it on a global stage. Right now, the big movement at the United Nations is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we hope to reach by 2030. These include climate justice, food security, clean water, gender justice, along with many more that we can see the emblems for on the screen. And so all of our work at the United Nations centers on these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how people of faith interpret them. And similar to our presence in DC, it's all done in ecumenical and interfaith community. The United Nations works in thematic areas. They work on peace and security, gender justice, climate action, global migration and movement, racial justice, sustainable development, food and hunger, and human rights. These are the primary thematic areas that guide all of our engagement and activity at the United Nations as a denomination. And they work on countries and in regions that the PCUSA has direct partnerships, direct people on the ground, direct ministries. And so that includes Cameroon, Colombia, Cuba, the Congo, Haiti, Israel, Palestine, the Korean Peninsula, Myanmar, Sudan and South Sudan, Syria, along with many more. But it is essential, just like our work in DC, that anything we advocate for or any engagement we undertake at the United Nations is directly connected to our participation in local communities. One way that you can get involved in our work at the United Nations or participate is each year the Presbyterian Church USA, alongside Presbyterian women, has a quite large delegation to the Commission on the Status of Women. This year it happened in March. Next year it usually happens around March or April. And this is a way to come together as a denomination and advocate for gender justice on the global stage and to get direct experience and engagement at the United Nations as a Presbyterian in the pews. Similarly, this intersects with the Matthew 25 initiatives of the PCUSA by prioritizing gender justice and dismantling heteropatriarchy. The church is involved in all the forums and commissions that the United Nations puts on, including the social development, high-level political forums, many more than I'm going to be able to name, since my colleagues take care of that work for us. Similarly, we are always a part and have a Presbyterian delegation at the UN Conference of Parties. Last year, the last 2 years, I've traveled for this event as a PCUSA representative, went to Egypt and Dubai. This year, it will be in Azerbaijan beginning on November 11th. And really, we as a denomination go to COP to show that climate change and the presence of fossil fuels has a real impact on local communities. We also make sure that we take alongside us impacted voices. So we always have young adults join us. We always have Indigenous voices join us as part of our delegation. And the night before COP takes place is a really special night within the interfaith community. The interfaith community will always gather for a time of worship and to share a meal, and then to put together a joint statement. So last year we broke up into small groups, each focused on one of the initiatives of climate change intersection. So I was part of the group focused on food. Some of my colleagues and our delegation focused on just transition or mitigation of climate change, impacted voices. And then we took each statement from each small group and compiled a large statement that would go to the heads of state and be presented the next day. And it was decided upon that evening that it would be the youngest among us to present that statement. So anyone under the age of 25 got up and read that together. We had 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 18-year-olds, some 20-year-olds and college students. And it was just a really beautiful moment of having these young voices that really care about and feel directly the impacts of climate change, stand up before heads of state and share this perspective from the interfaith community. One of the big focus areas of our joint offices, both the Office of Public Witness in DC and the Presbyterian Ministry at the United Nations, is young adults and young adult advocacies. Young adults really care about issues that impact them, impact their community, are human rights violations either here in the US or abroad, and they are doing advocacy. But sometimes they don't realize that the church also cares. And so we're really trying to invite young adults to partner with the church, to come alongside us, to be present in DC with us, to be present at the UN with us, to enhance their learning and advocacy efforts, but also to enhance ours. There's a lot of mutual learning that goes on. So some of the ways that we do this is the PCUSA has a young adult volunteer program, and both the Presbyterian Ministry at the United Nations and the Office of Public Witness often have a YAV among us. We offer internships for seminary students. We offer paid fellowship programs for the summer for anybody in college or of college age. We have young adults participate in high-level forums and delegations as commissioners, like I mentioned, to the Conference of Parties or to the Commission on the Status of Women, or here in DC, hosting visits on Capitol Hill with policymakers or administrative staff. And we will travel to speak and engage with young adults. So since we have some time left before I engage any questions, I'll leave you with this video created by our 2024 Summer Fellows. So you could hear about their experience and about our work here in DC and at the United Nations firsthand from them and from some of my fellow colleagues.
To the Christian Church, a part of our mission that we have stated across denominations is outreach to young adults, partnerships with young adults, engaging with young adults.
We as the Office of Public Witness find it vital to empower young people to take that crucial step to advocate on the issues that are important to them and the policies that we have passed within the PCUSA.
Each summer, we have an exciting opportunity to welcome students and young adults to work alongside us through our fellowship program. This program is essential to the life of the church, to the work of the Office of Public Witness and the Presbyterian Ministry at the United Nations.
I always find the retreat one of my favorite activities of the year. And the young people that come in are always so amazing. Their dedication, their sense of justice, their willingness to speak up, their sense of community and support of each other, their willingness to learn, and their willingness to be in community with us and genuine community with us is just a wonderful experience.
I found out about this summer fellowship opportunity through the 2023 Young Adult Advocacy Conference.
I found out about this fellowship earlier this year in January at the Montreat College Conference.
I met the Reverend Jimmy Hawkins at an event with my campus ministry on reparations.
I was led to apply really just out of sheer curiosity. I went ahead and applied last summer actually, and then I enjoyed it so much that this year I decided to come back and do it again, and this time I am a team leader as one of the fellows.
I had no idea that the Presbyterian Church USA did this, so it was super exciting to hear about it.
This fellowship matters to me because faith and social justice are two of my biggest passions in life. So the idea that I get to combine these two and work at the intersection of these two passions is such a dream come true.
As someone who might be interested in current public policy, I'm really glad to have this opportunity to explore what that means in a faith-centered setting.
I actually had never heard about the Office of Public Witness until just a few years ago. And when I learned about it, I was immediately excited to see this different dimension of the church. It's really important to me to see church communities advocating for the people who need help in this world, because they are plentiful, and that is the ministry that Jesus called us to.
I believe that advocating is such an essential part in being part of the body of Christ and working within the church. So just think it's important for not only to believe and witness the work of Christ, but also go and do.
They ask of me righteous judgments. They want God on their side. Right?
Growing up as a double pastor's kid, I have been both deeply hurt by the church and yet unable to shake my faith in a God of justice. The verse that identified my calling, James 2:26, is the verse about faith without works is dead. I have continued to have opportunities to study God and the Bible, but not enough opportunities to do the work that I want to do. The Office of Public Witness not only do the work alongside their faith, but they equip us as fellows and also the church at large with the resources and education to do the work. I saw the tip of that iceberg through the Young Adult Advocacy Conference and applied because I knew that they could help propel me toward the work that God has laid out for me.
This summer, one of the issues that I'm most excited to work on is voting rights and civic engagement.
I will be working on voters' rights education and the necessities to know before going to the polls, and I'm going to be working alongside Aria as she does certain policy education and what to expect on the ballots this year.
Especially because 2024 is an election year, having the opportunity to create resources for voters and Presbyterians who are looking for what policies do candidates support and what does the GA say about our policies. I'm really happy to provide that information and talk a lot more and learn a lot more about it.
I'm going to be working on reaching out on behalf of the Office of Public Witness to the Presbyterian members of Congress.
I'm super excited to get to work on human rights issues such as the ongoing Colombian peace process, gender justice for women and girls everywhere, and peace in Israel-Palestine.
One issue I've started to work on recently is Cuba and the ongoing American relations, or lack thereof, and the actions taken that are somewhat in the right direction, but at the same time not nearly enough for the people from Cuba who are constantly hurting and being affected by U.S. sanctions. And I've started working with Catherine Gordon, my supervisor, as well as the WISC Interfaith Council to develop a response and ongoing communications regarding these issues.
I did draft an action alert that I hope to be publishing soon about housing related to budgeting in the fiscal year 2025.
During this retreat, I'm excited to network and meet all of the other fellows here, as well as all of the staff members in the Office of Public Witness. We have already begun spending time with each other and getting to know each other, and I'm super excited about all the different personalities and important traits that everyone brings to this group. I'm excited to explore these friendships more, not only for the summer, but also going forward, even after the fellowship is over.
A passion that I am bringing to the Office of Public Witness is creativity, and the skill that I bring alongside that is film production.
One skill I bring to the office is a strong sense of decision-making and efficiency.
Good communication and charisma.
My passion for human rights for all people.
My sense of teamwork.
Social media and using sort of marketing and communications to portray the ideas of both the church and the policies that we support.
I'm really able to hit the ground running and really able to go with the flow no matter what happens.
My passion for advocacy work and my interest in researching a variety of different issues.
I really enjoy being part of a team and understanding each person's strengths and the role that they play in making the team successful.
I think the number one thing I would tell the fellows is to trust themselves.
In this work, it's really important, and I think we'll continue to be able to do this good work if you work together in collaboration, and to encourage one another and to share with one another and to pursue your passions and find interests that really excite you, that you want to work on.
I encourage our fellows to remember the mentors that have been a part of your journey.
Ask for help. people really do want to help. And so making those connections and sharing your thoughts and asking for help in areas where maybe you don't know as much or how to navigate, I think will be a good thing to remember.
Your family that has supported you, your friends, and those that you call family. Also, your professors and your supervisors that have mentored you along the way. These are points of connections that will sustain you for years to come.
My encouragement and tip for the fellows this summer is that they just continue to be open to grow and to learn.
To the fellows, continue to have an attitude that you want to continue to grow.
Every little effort counts.
We think this opportunity is just a fantastic way to jump into the work, to know that advocacy is possible and that your voice matters.
Their young voices for justice and peace are so important.
And we want to hear their voices and we care about their voices. And the Presbyterian Church is focused around justice and making sure that this world is a better place for all people.
Similarly, remember your faith. Remember the God that loves you and graciously embraces you. Remember to return to God when times are exciting and worth celebrating.
You have so many different adventures that are awaiting you, so many different opportunities to engage with other people of like mind, and also to have encounters with those with whom you disagree, to continue to want God's Spirit to move in your life, to offer you guidance, but most of all to offer you hope.
And so we share that as an invitation to any young adults among us, but also as an invitation to all of you. Your voices matter. Your passions and concerns for your community matter. And we would love to have you visit either our office in Washington, D.C., or it might be easier to visit the Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations.
Thank you
So
so
Jamie,
much.
and I'm happy to answer a couple questions if we have
Yeah.
time.
Thank you so much, Christina. This has been amazing. I just want to say, folks, that I was able to be a young woman delegate to the Commission on the Status of Women in 2013, and it was like the most amazing 2 weeks of my life. Being able to sit in on such fantastic worship services and workshops with NGOs, and it was amazing. And I also had the privilege to participate in two different ecumenical advocacy days in Washington, D.C., which those both were really awesome as well. So folks, if you're interested in that type of a thing, both of those places and opportunities are just absolutely amazing to really think about what our denomination does. We've got a couple questions in the chat and in the thing. I'll just read a couple of them. I don't know how many we have time for, but from Anne, my life's work has focused on teachers. Actually, I'm going to read her first one because it's really just about, she would like to know about the podcasts that you mentioned. And I know you said you were going to throw resources in the chat. Are the podcasts included in that?
They are not currently, but I will make sure to put it there.
Pop those over. Okay, perfect. And then
but it's called A Matter of Faith, and if you search it in your podcast library, it will come up.
A Matter
of
Faith.
Lots of followers.
Perfect. And then the second part was, my life's work has focused on teachers being equipped to work with multilingual learners in K through 12 public and private schools. Refugees and immigrants are involved in so much of my work. Can you say more about your work with identifying and exploring the root causes of migration?
Sure, thank you. And that is a great question. The Presbyterian Church actually has a whole ministry area dedicated to immigration reform and migration accompaniment. And so they would be able to answer your questions far better than I could. I rely on them for a resource. But essentially, looking at how migration is both forced and it can be voluntary, but looking at the impacts of war and sanctions and addressing those through policy concerns. Also, the effects of climate change and rising sea levels, forcing communities out of their homelands. Also, increase and decrease extreme temperatures. And so looking at the root causes of migration and asylum seekers, and then using those root causes to advocate for policy that would help to alleviate those causes and improve lives.
Thank you.
But Presbyterian disaster assistance would be your go-to.
Yes. So many good options to look for resources and places to have things. I just always think, why reinvent the wheel when we've already done so much to put these forward? That they're great resources. Another question, how do you stay emotionally strong and consistently engaged with such huge global concerns and problems? Any resilience advice for us as we address issues in our local communities?
Good. Another really great question. If I'm honest, it does weigh on you. And it does weigh on you a lot, sometimes more than others. I think my community of faith, my personal worshiping community, helps a lot with that, knowing that there is a place that I can go to worship and be in God's presence, to be in fellowship with other like-minded people, and to have tough conversations when we disagree. Also, taking those moments each day to tend to my needs. This summer, Jamie will laugh at this, but this summer I had 3 weeks off, and I decided I wanted to do something totally out of the box and new. And I realized I hate running, so I decided to start running. And that has become a spiritual practice for me and a turn of events to recognize the parallels between running and our faith. There's so many mornings that I get up and I just I feel tired or sticky or, sluggish. And pushing through that to come to a more ease into the pace of the run for that day, and recognizing that 100% today might not be the same as 100% tomorrow, and giving ourselves grace in that, both when it comes to policy concerns, tending to others' needs and tending to our own needs. But taking that time to find what gives you joy, whether it's running or reading a book, and being in community with others.
Absolutely. We are almost out of time. I know you said you were going to throw a couple things in the chat.
I'm trying.
Oh, there we go. That's all right. No, I just wanted to make sure. I know folks were interested in the resources. And folks, if it's too difficult to get it out of the chat, or if we close too soon and you can't copy it all, I am going to email this resource list out along with the recording of this for the folks who went to see stuff, and some other folks who weren't able to make it. So if you don't worry about feeling like you need to get all of this all at once, but it is helpful. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Christina. This has been fantastic. I just really think, particularly during these times as we're getting closer to the election, it is just heartening to feel that our denomination does have a voice. It is making a difference, and that we can also join with the denomination to make a difference, and that feels good. So thank you again so much for joining us this evening, and thanks folks at home for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week. All right, folks.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.